follow-up to the New Year's Eve migrant rape crisis. As usual, there are links and references to support everything said in this video in the description to this video. There are also in-video citations to indicate the source for each and every bit of information. I was wrong! I made a prediction in my last video. I said that there would be a wave of rapes in Western European cities on New Year's Eve just like last year despite increased security. Well, I was wrong. Or at least partially wrong, we think. So far. As far as we know at this point, the rapes were far fewer in number, but still there was a wave of sexual assaults. As we saw in my last video, New Year's Eve migrant rape crisis, after the rapes occurred in European cities during the 2015/2016 New Year's Eve festivities, the police, politicians, and mainstream media avoided addressing the issue and were reluctant to give honest and accurate information about it. But some information did come out, although it took some months, and we're still not sure if the whole truth has come out even yet. For example, on July 11, 2016, the Washington Post reported that leaked documents revealed that 2,000 men sexually assaulted 1,200 women in Germany alone on that one night. But, as I explained in my aforementioned video, this may still be a mere fraction of the actual cases. As the German Federal Criminal Police Office told the German media, quote, "We have to presume that many of those crimes will never be fully investigated," unquote, due to the high number of attacks and low-grade CCTV footage of the incident. And then, according to the German people themselves who compiled the Einzelfall map, the police are only telling them about a fraction of the cases that they know about. Also, it seems that in some nations, arguably Sweden in particular, they are keeping their migrant issues tightly under wraps. See the links in the description to this video for this article by Arpi, this one by Barome, Frick, and Mattsson, and this one by Ogerum. And there may be other factors making this worse. In Sweden, for example, scientists have decided that it was too racist to make any record of ethnic appearance of criminals when studying crime statistics. As they said in this 2005 paper on Swedish crime statistics,
in our last report there were detailed analysis made in regards to perpetrator country of origin. This time we have decided that such a detailed analysis serves no purpose.
That was from a video by YouTuber Angry Foreigner that I highly recommend. There's a link to this in the description to this video, just like for everything else. Both the police and the mainstream media in Sweden would not report on last New Year's Eve sexual assaults. Concerning crime by migrants in general, the Swedish police have flat out said that they intentionally cover up the ethnicity of criminals that they deal with because the media calls them racist and fascist when they release such information. See the links in the description to this video for this article by Arpi, this one by Barome, Frick, and Mattsson, and this one by Ogerum. You see, if a woman identifies her attacker and the attacker is dark-skinned, then she is racist. Yes, this stuff actually does happen. See the article by SWR Fernsen. This victim here was blamed for being a victim because she identified the ethnicity of her attackers. She was attacked online by social justice warriors. So again, if the woman identifies the person who sexually assaulted her and that person is not white, then apparently she's racist. And if a police person writes down that her attacker is dark-skinned, then that police person is racist. If the media reports that an attacker was dark-skinned, then the media is racist. Of course, this decreases the awareness of who potential attackers might be, and therefore it leads to more sexual assaults, at least in theory, but probably in reality. Because, for example, if you do not know that a migrant is more likely to rape you than a non-migrant, then you might not take any extra precautions around migrants, and you might get sexually assaulted. And so it is very possible, if not probable, that there are many sexual assaults that occurred last year that we still do not know about, and therefore the same may be true of this year. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that there are no more rapes other than those that we mentioned in this video. I hope it doesn't come out that there is another cover-up of hundreds of rapes. Rape whistles and anti-rape alarms. Because of all the sexual assaults committed across Western European cities last New Year's Eve, security was increased in many places. Also in some cities, rape whistles or anti-rape alarms were handed out by the thousands. This is according to the Daily Caller, the Washington Post, and RT. These measures may have prevented many potential rapes, but it did not prevent all rapes, as we will see. Central Europe. Einzelfall reports sexual assaults in Zurich, Switzerland, the German cities of Freiburg, Garmisch-Partenkirchen, Frankfurt, Flensburg, Glucksburg, Hamburg, Coesfeld, Trier, Wiesbaden, and Tannstein, and the Austrian cities of Innsbruck, Graz, and Salzburg. Cologne, Germany. In last New Year's Eve in Cologne, there were hundreds of assaults that we know of so far by Muslim migrants, mostly North African migrants. As we saw in my last video on this, these rapists used social media to plan the attacks ahead of time, and then they showed up in vast numbers and used the sheer force of their numbers to rape and get away with it for the most part. This year, authorities were ready and waiting for the planned attacks. One German paper reported, quote, "Die Männer hatten sich offenbar gesagt verabredet," unquote, which translates to, quote, "the men had clearly agreed with each other to attack," unquote. This is according to T-Online. So hundreds of them approached Cologne's main square as a group. They were stopped by the Polizei, the police, and turned away. This is according to T-Online and Stuttgarter Nachrichten. About 100 arrests were made, according to the Washington Post. It seemed that this saved hundreds of women from being sexually assaulted in Cologne alone. But of course, the regressive left are mad about it. The regressive left would rather that women be raped than anyone be racially profiled. Amnesty International also denounced the racial profiling. Another thing that they're complaining about is the use of the term Nafri. Nafri is just an abbreviation of North African. And the police say that the term is not derogatory. But of course people are trying to make it into a derogatory term. A famous German comedian, Jan Böhmermann, for example, tweeted, quote, "What's the difference between Nafri and N-word?" unquote. Christopher Lauer of the Social Democrat Party said, quote, "I consider this term to be highly dehumanizing," unquote. And, quote, "If hundreds of people are described as such on New Year's Eve, it is a general condemnation of an entire community based only on their appearance," unquote. Naima Mulfasat, the MP from the Left Party, accused the Cologne police of, quote, "structural racism," unquote. An unidentified spokesperson for the Cologne police said, quote, "The term is free of any value judgment. It was only used on Twitter to save characters," unquote. The spokesperson pointed out that they use similar abbreviations for other ethnicities, such as Rubu, which is short for Romanian Bulgarian. The leader of Germany's Green Party, Simone Peters, said that even though the police actions in Cologne has, quote, "clearly limited violence and attacks," unquote, it was perhaps still wrong to do so, she says, quote, "when a total of just under 1,000 people were checked and partially determined by appearance alone," unquote. This is according to the Stuttgarter Nachrichten. With this and similar complaints, the police there have been accused of racism. Like many others, Simone Peter took issue with the police's use of the term Nafri. She said, quote, "completely unacceptable is the use of degrading group names such as Nafris for North Africans by state bodies such as the police." This is from Stuttgarter Nachrichten. I think their ultimate objection is not to the actual term being used, but that the police actually identify the attackers as being mostly North African men. As we briefly touched upon earlier, there is this growing trend in Western and Northern Europe of not identifying the ethnicity of that criminal if that criminal is an ethnic minority. If they were white German men, of course it would be okay to say so. So I think the real objection is not to the actual term Nafri, but is just an intellectually dishonest pushing of a politically correct agenda without actually saying so. Cologne's police department agreed that they were bad people for using such a term, but also said that they needed to use some term to indicate North Africans, quote, "who have distinguished themselves for years with a particular willingness to use violence," unquote, in order to prevent a repeat of last year's mass rapes. This is according to the Washington Post. On January 1st, the Telegraph reported, quote, "Jürgen Mathis, Cologne police chief, rejected accusations that his officers had conducted racial profiling, arguing that many of the men detained had acted in an aggressive manner," unquote. Remember that these men showed up in a group of hundreds after it was reported in Germany. They again used social media to plan sexual assaults. So in other words, they showed up as a little army planning to rape and to get away with it. They planned it ahead of time, they showed up in a group to do it, and they were turned away. And of course the police are racist for doing so. Cologne's police chief said, quote, "I reject such criticism. The clear aim was to prevent similar events to those of last year," unquote. This is according to the Telegraph. Still, an estimated 100 arrests were made that night in Cologne alone, and roughly dozens of sexual assaults or insults were reported, at least as far as the public's allowed to know so far. This is according to the Telegraph. So, yes, again, dozens of people were sexually assaulted in Cologne despite increased police presence. The police then made the obligatory and completely unnecessary disclaimer that the majority of North Africans living in Germany are not offenders. This is according to the Stuttgarter Nachrichten. Why must we say not all every time we criticize only certain members of a group? Why can't we say that some Muslim migrants raped women without saying, but not all of them? Why can't we mention a Muslim terrorist without also saying, but I'm not saying all Muslims are terrorists? If you do not find it insulting to your intelligence for somebody to say, but not all of them, you're stupid. Because it is insulting to the intelligent. For those of us who do think it's completely unnecessary to always say, not all. So try to catch up, you moron. moron. So, according to many, if you prevent rapes, then you're racist as long as the attacker is not white. But there's hope. Thankfully, as the Washington Post reports, quote, "Yet far more voices appeared to push back against the critics, crediting the police with taking measures to prevent a repeat of last year's violent New Year's Eve, when more than 1,200 women were sexually assaulted in various German cities, including more than 600 in Cologne and about 400 in Hamburg," unquote. The chairman of the Social Democratic Party and Germany's Vice Chancellor, Sigmar Gabriel, said that it has, quote, "nothing to do with racism but with smart public safety," unquote. Gabriel also said, quote, "What else should the police do apart from stopping exactly that group of North Africans and preventing them from accessing Cologne's inner city?" Also, large numbers of German people have been protesting the so-called rape-fugees in the streets after last New Year's Eve and this New Year's Eve. And many Germans have protested the way that their government is forcing them to take in migrants against their will and to their detriment in general. Of course, they are all dismissed as being far-right nationalists at best or even neo-Nazis. Though there has been actual neo-Nazis and far-right nationalists protesting the migrants in Germany, most of the time when the media says that a group is far-right or neo-Nazi, they are neither.
A senior German intelligence official has told Newsnight that Germany's open door policy is fueling a rise of the far right.
Merkel must go, they chant. The refugees may see the German Chancellor as their saviour, but these people do not. To them, she is Mother Teresa. People's traitor, they shout. This is the backlash against Germany's generous refugee policy. These are the dissenters, and their numbers are swelling.
Sometimes if you look closely in a photo or in a video, you will see the proof that the media is lying. Like when you see an explicitly anti-Nazi symbol in a crowd of people that the media is saying are neo-Nazis. Some voice their views online, like this guy.
Ein Jahr ist vergangen, seit ich das letzte Mal auf der Bildfläche aufgetaucht bin. Und in diesem einen Jahr haben unsere Freunde, die Nafris, die nordafrikanischen Intensivstraftäter, wie die Polizei sie endlich richtig benennt, so richtig viel Mut gefasst. Mit den dummen Deutschen kann man's hier machen, Alter. Deutschland ist mittlerweile der verhasste Schleuser von Zehntausenden kriminellen Nordafrikanern nach Europa. Und Deutschland ist eine Lachnummer für die arabische Welt. Oh ja, bitte bereichere mich kulturell. Nicht immer mehr Polizeiberichte von Polizisten, die die Schnauze voll haben. Dort werden Straftaten massenweise vom Innenministerium vertuscht. Dort werden Flüchtlinge mit iPhones beschenkt. Dort werden Nafris, nordafrikanische Intensivstraftäter, mal eben zu Deutschen umdefiniert. Leute, es reicht!
Some German people are protesting by uploading videos that the mainstream media will not show you, like this video here of migrants firing off guns almost into crowds of German people. What are these migrants doing with guns in the first place, and why are they not afraid to take them out and just fire them into the air and almost into crowds? This is the state that Germany is in right now. These migrants feel like they can take guns out of their pockets and fire them openly where everybody can see them do it because they feel like they won't get in trouble for doing so, because they probably won't. So although the media is trying to manipulate Germans and the rest of the world into thinking that only bad people protest the migrants, in reality, good, fine German people are protesting the way that their government is forcing them to deal with this situation, and it's not ethical. It is not ethical to force people to take in other people against their will. But anyway, let's move on. Hamburg, Germany. On January 3rd, the Express reported that 14 women were allegedly victims of sexual assault in the German city of Hamburg, despite the increased security. Austria. On January 2nd, the German news outlet The Standard reported sexual assaults during New Year's Eve celebrations in the Austrian cities of Salzburg, Graz, and Innsbruck. In Innsbruck alone, by January 2nd, 11 alleged victims were already known to have reported being sexually assaulted. One of the alleged perpetrators is described as being 18 years old, and the rest are described as being under 30, and all are described as being of North African appearance with black hair and partial beards. An investigator said that the attackers worked as a group and that they had a system which included separating the victims from their own group. This is the Taharush Jamai that I discussed in my last video. These are coordinated gang rapes. It's a thing in North Africa and in the Middle East. Yes, it's a thing. We're talking about rape culture, real rape culture, the rape culture that social justice warriors and the regressive left do not want to discuss. Which is why they are not discussing these rapes. In Graz, Austria, a 26-year-old woman on her way home from the city's festivities was allegedly sexually harassed by two men, described as being of foreign appearance between 25 and 35 years of age, according to the Standard. By January 3rd, at least 16 sexual assaults were recorded across Austria that the press actually knows about at least, or that they're telling us. according to the local. 11 were reported in the Austrian city of Innsbruck. The victims were women from Austria, Italy, Germany, and Switzerland. According to the local, quote, the women all said that they were assaulted by a group of dark-haired men who appeared to be under the age of 30 and that most of them had beards, unquote. This number would increase to 18 by the next day, according to Reuters, the local, Russian Times, and the BBC. For Austria, this is an unprecedented number of sexual assaults in one night. Senior police official Ernst Krambitter said, quote, we have not had anything like this happen here before, unquote. He also said, quote, they were dancing around the victims and then suddenly grabbed their breasts or stuck their hands between their legs. That's what made it hard for others to notice what was going on. It all happened amid festivities, unquote. This is according to the local and Russian Times. According to the local, quote, a police spokesman said it's likely it was one group of men who harassed the various women and that the men had a system. They targeted women who had become separated from their friends or a larger group of people, or were dancing by themselves, unquote. The Daily Telegraph UK also reported that the assaults were, quote, systematic, unquote, and that the perpetrators formed a ring around the victims, cutting them off from their male counterparts. Austrian police official Krambitter also said that the suspects are in their late teens. This is according to the local and Russian Times. But this is contradicted by reports that said that they were all in their 20s and 30s, according to Reuters, on January 4th. Well, you know, they could be among the many migrants who claim to be a lot younger than they are. The local reported that there is amateur video footage of the incidents, but that it is too poor in quality to use to identify any of the suspects. This is according to the local and Russian Times. According to the BBC, a special police team is hunting at least 6 suspects in the Innsbruck attacks, men of North African or Asian descent, and their search includes refugee shelters. Reuters reports that witnesses described the attackers as being of dark complexions, though their nationality was unclear, but an Innsbruck police spokesperson said, quote, it has definitely been proven that they were foreign, unquote, and, quote, we have never seen anything in this form. I cannot remember an attack of this intensity on this scale and with this modus operandi, unquote. This is according to Reuters. The Daily Telegraph reported that an Austrian woman filed a report that she had been sexually assaulted along with 3 of her friends and her own daughter. 4 women reported being sexually assaulted in Salzburg, Austria that we know of so far, according to the local as of January 3rd. One alleged victim was a 31-year-old German woman who had reported being sexually assaulted by a man who was later arrested and who is described as being an 18-year-old asylum seeker. And in Graz, Austria, it is reported that a 26-year-old woman was sexually harassed by 2 men who appeared to be foreign and between 25 and 35 years old. This is according to the local. On New Year's Day, Kronenzeitung, a German media source, reported 3 sexual assaults in the Austrian cities of Vienna and Salzburg. They also reported that 5 to 6, quote, foreign-looking men, unquote, sexually assaulted the women in Innsbruck, Austria, and that the victims were from Germany, Romania, and Italy. Also around 4 a.m. in the district of Nigli, a 16-year-old girl was allegedly sexually assaulted by a taxi driver. This is all from Kronenzeitung on January 1st. On the following day, they reported several more cases in multiple Austrian cities, including 9 more victims coming forward in Innsbruck alone. They reported that the perpetrators were of North African appearance and that they had a system in which they cut the victims off from their companions by surrounding them and then sexually assaulted them. This is according to Kronenzeitung. Updates. While I was adding the finishing touches to this video, the following new information has been reported. Germany, Berlin. You may have noticed that Berlin has been conspicuously absent from news reports. One would expect that being such a big city, Berlin would see sexual assaults too. Well, on January 10th, Der Tagesspiegel reported that on New Year's Eve in Berlin, quote, 23 crimes have been reported that took place between 7 p.m. and 2 a.m. in the open-air grounds. Police have new details on the victims and assailants. All the victims were women. The 4 suspects under investigation are men. 2 of them have Pakistani nationality and are both 25 years old. Another 20-year-old suspect holds Iranian nationality. The 4th man is 26 years old and his nationality cannot be ascertained. The assailants moved in packs. There were also a few posts on social media describing organized groups that groped and tried to snatch valuables. These postings described assailants as North Africans and Arabs. Police cannot comment on those descriptions, unquote. Cologne. Police are now saying that the crowd of men they stopped and turned away were not all North Africans, but also included Iraqis and Syrians. On January 13th, the New York Times via the Associated Press and the Washington Post via the Associated Press both say, quote, police initially said that of the some 670 people detained for identity checks, nearly all were North African. But they said Friday that of 425 whose nationality has been established, 99 were Iraqi and 94 Syrian, along with 48 Afghans and 46 Germans. There were 17 Moroccans and 13 Algerians, news agency DPA reported, unquote. On January 13th, the local reported that some of these were from Afghanistan and that, quote, only a small portion came from North Africa, unquote. The local also reports, quote, police clarified on Friday that there were around 2,000, quote, young men who appeared to be North African or Arabic, unquote, who arrived at either the Central City train station or the Dude station. Officers made a total of 2,500 checks, though many people were checked more than once. In total, police investigated the identities of 674 people, and of this group, officers could determine the nationalities of 425 people. The largest group of people came from Iraq, 99, followed by Syria, 94, and Afghanistan, 48. Another 46 were Germans, while 17 were Moroccan and 13 were Algerian. The Kölner Stadt Einziger reported that there was also one Tunisian identified, unquote. German news outlet Frankfurter Allgemeine reports that the first foreign minister, Armin Schuster, said that the migrant men who showed up in the large group in Cologne were making a, quote, power test, unquote. They were testing the strength and resolve of the German citizens and police. Notable German feminist Alice Schwarzer agreed that it was a power test and also said, quote, the same thing as it was a year ago. It was important to, quote-unquote, celebrate in Cologne. They are uprooted, brutalized, and Islamized young men, mainly from Algeria and Morocco. If the police had not stepped up from the outset this time, hundreds of women would be driven out of the public space with sexual violence again, and the, quote-unquote, helpless men at their side would have been humbled again, unquote. And, quote, that was a power test, a challenge for the state. After all, these newly re-enrolled men must be clear that they would meet with police resistance this time, unquote. She also said that the migrants are, quote, marked by patriarchal traditions, unquote. Contrast this feminist voice with that of American feminist voices in the media other than real feminists like Christina Hoff Sommers, who are largely silent about the attacks last year and this year. Generally speaking, they refuse to criticize the most patriarchal and the most sexist and the most misogynistic culture on earth, because of the old and very fucking stupid idea that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In other words, if white patriarchy in the West hates brown Muslim people, then I have to defend brown Muslim people and ignore everything they do bad, even though they are the most sexist, misogynistic culture on earth. This is not to disparage feminism, not real feminism, because real feminist voices are actually not afraid to call out the sexism and the patriarchy of Islam and of the cultures of North Africa and the Middle East. Other cities in Germany. LifeSet has reported on the details of sexual assaults in other German cities, some of which I mentioned earlier in this video, along with others that I did not. Quote, a 46-year-old German woman was raped by a Pakistani migrant in Regensburg, Germany during the early hours of New Year's Day. In Garmisch-Partenkirchen, a 24-year-old woman was molested at a train station by a man she described as having, quote, dark skin, unquote. In Trier, a 19-year-old woman was also molested by a migrant on her way home from New Year's Eve celebrations. In Flensburg, a 17-year-old woman was sexually assaulted by a man described as having, quote, North African, unquote, appearance. In Glucksburg on New Year's Day, a 30-year-old woman was sexually assaulted by a migrant in the Schinderdam neighborhood. In Frankfurt, a 25-year-old woman was sexually assaulted by a migrant at the Estersteg Iron Bridge. In Ulm, a 25-year-old woman was assaulted by an African immigrant. In Freiburg on New Year's Day, a 24-year-old woman was sexually assaulted on the Kaiser Joseph Strasse by a man described as having, quote, North African Arabian appearance, unquote. In the city of Wiesbaden, a 34-year-old woman was sexually assaulted by her taxi driver, described as having, quote, black, short, slightly curly hair and a foreign appearance, unquote. 10 men were arrested for sexual assault during the early hours of New Year's Day in Hamburg alone, unquote. It's interesting to note that this article then goes on to mention other sexual assaults in the days following the New Year's Eve celebrations, concluding with, quote, as of Monday, January 9th, not 10 days into the new year, there have been at least 35 rapes or sexual assaults reported in Germany and Austria. That is a rate of roughly 3.7 per day, unquote. Austria. The New York Times via the Associated Press and Washington Post via the Associated Press on January 9th reports, quote, Austrian police say they have identified 6 young men suspected of groping at least 18 women during New Year's Eve festivities in the city of Innsbruck. Innsbruck Police Chief Martin Kirchler told reporters Monday that the 6 are Afghan nationals aged 18 to 22, some of them living in migrant shelters, unquote. Euractiv reports that of these, quote, 1 man has confessed and apologized, but the other 5 deny the accusations, Ernst Kranbitter of the Tyrol Police Force said, adding that the police have made no arrests yet pending the end of their investigation, unquote. Euractiv also reports, quote, some victims managed to take pictures of their assailants with their mobile phones, which helped police find the 6 men, who are aged between between 18 and 22 and previously lived in the same migrant hostel, he said, unquote. This is Euractiv reporting on January 9th. LifeSet reports, quote, a German woman was lured into the park in the St. George neighborhood of Hamburg Saturday, where she was assaulted and robbed by a gang of African migrants. The 28-year-old nurse was returning home when she heard cries coming from the Lomelen Park. The would-be Good Samaritan ran into the park in order to help what she thought was someone in distress, only to be set upon by 5 men. The woman lost consciousness during the attack and awoke to find her belongings missing and her clothes torn off her body, unquote. That's the end of the updates, and thankfully that's the end of the bad news, at least as far as we know so far this year. Let's hope I don't have to make another update video with more bad news. Okay, thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Please make sure you click on the little bell icon there, otherwise you'll never know when I have a new video out, even if you are subscribed to me, because YouTube is really fucking stupid. And please seriously consider jumping over to Minds.com. It's far superior. It's like Facebook plus YouTube, and it doesn't have any censorship, no advertisements, and no bullshit.